Good morning, everyone. I'm Lance Barron, Vice President of the Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter, and welcome to Off the Shelf, hosted by our own Dawn Gepford. This morning, our guest is Mary Kelihikoa. She is the Shamus finalist and Lefty, Agatha and Anthony nominated author of the P.I. Kelly Pruett series and the Misty Pines mystery series with a former Portland homicide detective turned small town sheriff. Her short stories have been in Woman's World, anthology of peace, love, and crime. She's a native of the Pacific Northwest and spent years working around lawyers, and admits to being that person who gets excited when called for jury duty. And we'll ask her how many times she's been on a jury. When not in Washington, you can find Mary on the beach in Hawaii. But even under the palm trees and the blazing sun, she's plotting her next murder, a novel, that is, in the misty, rainy Portland, Oregon. So, welcome, Mary, to Off the Shelf. And Dawn, take it away.
Thank you, Lance, and good morning, everybody. And Mary, thank you for joining us because, as Lance said, you are in the Pacific Northwest. What time is it there?
It is 7:03.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock here, and I barely am here. So thank you so much for joining us so early. I always like to kick off the shelf. And by the way, let me preface all this by explaining what this program is. This is something we just started recently. It's the Atlanta Sisters in Crime chapter. It's a program where our intent is to bring readers to our authors and to learn new authors. And the title of the program, Off the Shelf, comes from the idea of getting our authors' books off the shelf and in readers' hands. And it is still a relatively new program. We're still in the baby steps, so forgive any technical difficulties we may have or any challenges. We're learning as we go. So again, thank you for joining us. And I love to start off the program by asking our authors to tell us their backstory. So please tell us about who you are aside from being an author.
Kind of like what I do in my day job sort of thing, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I did spend 18 years in law, as my bio suggests. I actually worked in legal right out of high school. My home ec teacher's husband was a bankruptcy lawyer. And so I, after school, would go and spend time in his office typing up Chapter 7 bankruptcy petitions. And that sort of was my step into the legal world. And then my sister, who lived in Oklahoma, was a legal secretary. I went and visited her on the summer of my senior year. And I was like, I like this. I could do this. College was not one of those things that was championed in my family. My dad was a fisherman. My mom was a bank teller. It was all about going to work. So I went to work and I became a legal secretary for 18 years. And when I was 35, we opened up a company and I stepped away from the legal field. And I got into natural pet foods for dogs and cats. And so for 22 years, my husband and I have owned 2 natural pet stores and a distribution company. We have 33 employees. I'm actually the CFO of the company, the chief financial person. I run all the numbers. I'm a numbers girl besides a words girl. And and that is my day job, although I am going to be 57 this year and I am inching towards retirement. So, so I'm hoping to be out of that and just writing full time. But that's my backstory. Yeah. And I'm a stepmom to 2 grown girls and 10 grandchildren, if you can believe that. I'm celebrating 33 years of marriage in July. And I've been busy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I didn't know about the entrepreneur side. I knew about the legal side because you shared that in your bio, but I didn't realize you had a business
Yeah, I have two different lives, right? I had the
You have
whole life.
three, don't you?
Three. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because I do write really almost full time these days.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
I thought that's what you were going to tell me, that you, when you got out of the legal field, you went into writing full time. So wow, that's impressive. And I love the concept of the natural foods. I'm a dog lover. So that's great. I'm going to have to check out your company. You do ship, right? Because you
well,
said about
we're the
distribution.
middleman, so we're distributions. So we
Okay.
buy from the manufacturers. We have like a 30,000 square foot warehouse, and
Wow.
we run trucks 5 days a week, 10 trucks in the Oregon and Washington marketplace. So we're the middleman. So
If
yeah.
I can ask, what does your husband do? Was he in the legal field as well and
No,
transitioned with you?
No, he was actually, he worked for a fire and safety company, and he was their #1 sales rep. So he was actually out selling safety to, the Kevlar vests that police wear, or the masks that the firefighters wear. Safety covers everything, right? Safety harnesses for construction guys, suits for high tech industry. So he did all of that, and he was their #1 sales rep. And we had wanted to work together for years, but because we're just one of those couples that like we're just together all the time. That's just our thing. We're best friends. And we were like, it wouldn't be fun to own a company together. And so I stepped out first into a self-serve dog wash, natural pet store sort of thing. And 9 months later, he had the opportunity to distribute a dog food. So we started in our 3-car garage. I was working a retail location. He was working out of our garage. And then, 22 years later, it's kind of become its own thing. And he's the CEO and I'm the CFO, but we have great managers that run our company. And so we get to play a little bit more than we used to. So
that honestly sounds wonderful. I think that sounds great. And likewise, I am 57 this year.
Yay.
So I wish my backstory was as great as your backstory. It's not. All right. So I know about your legal background. That's what you share in your bio. So was that the jumping off point for you to start writing mysteries? Tell us how you got started.
Yeah, so I started writing when I was 27, and I was 10 years into the legal field, and I was sitting next to a lady. We had a shared wall, and she really loved writing mysteries and reading mysteries, and she wanted to try her hand in writing one. Well, we have a full hour sitting downtown Portland, and we thought, hey, we could write a book together. I mean, we have a whole hour every day, right, let's go do this. So every day on our lunch hour, we would go sit in a cafe and we started writing a book. And it took us about 2 years of, every lunch hour, occasional weekends we'd get together. And that book didn't go anywhere. We tried to find an agent for it, but it just didn't go anywhere. And she kind of stopped writing, but I had the bug at that point. I was like, this is my thing. I love to write. So I went on to write 2 more standalones, which also did not go anywhere. And then I wrote Derailed in 1999, finished it in 2000. And then my husband and I had this idea for our company. And so I shelved my book. So I shelved Derailed, put it on a shelf for 16 years, really. And we went out and started our company. And that's what we did. So, and then I came back to writing when I turned 50. I was like, we sold a part of our company off. And I was like, I think I'd like to write again. I want to see what that book looks like. It's been up there for all these years, and over the years I would look at it longingly, but I just didn't have the bandwidth to go and start writing, because when you're creating a company and you're managing employees and you're just, it's 12 hours of your life, there's really not a lot of time to do much else, right? But the minute we sold our company, all of a sudden I had this hole in my life and I wanted to create it with something creative again. And that's when I came back to writing. So I've been back writing almost 7 years now.
So when you pulled, it was Derailed, right? When you pulled Derailed off the shelf, and after it having sat off the shelf, after it having sat there for, maybe that's the other part of this program. Maybe we have a branch off to people that pull old stories off the shelf and revisit them. So, but let's talk about that real quick. So when you pull, it's 16 years old, and the world has changed quite a bit in 16 years. So was there a lot of revision and updating you needed to do?
Oh, absolutely. And social media was a thing. I mean, it was just, there was Twitter and there was Facebook, and, it was a really different world than what I had left in the writing world. So I came back in June of 2016, and I found Pitch Wars, which was on Twitter. That was like one of the very first things I saw when I was scrolling through Twitter. And I decided to enter Derailed into Pitch Wars, and it was chosen by Kelly Garrett. And so she was my 2016 Pitch Wars mentor, Kelly Garrett and Sarah Henning. And so the answer to that question is, oh, yes, it did go through a ton of revisions. And a lot of it was, that there wasn't Facebook. So, now a PI can start scrolling social media to see where you might be or where you've been. Smartphones, you can sit in your car and Google something right there. So there were so many things that I had to bring it up to date with, so that it was a lot more in the now. And that was the big thing Kelly told me immediately. It was like, yeah, you need to bring this into the 2020s here, 2016s, because you're way behind, girl. Like, yeah, sorry. It's my age was showing at that point, because I'm like, I don't know how to do all this social media stuff, but it was a learning curve, a lot of changes.
When I got started reading Sue Grafton a little late, and I was insistent on, when I read her, to read her in alphabetical order. And in those first books, like when she had to stop at a payphone and looks, I was like, wait, what? And then I realized this, gosh, I'm way behind. I'm way behind in reading her. So had I read her initially, it wouldn't have startled me so much.
Right.
And then, of course, thinking about when you are trying to write somebody back then, because I think she kept Kinsey kind of consistently in age.
80s.
So
yeah.
Even though the years had passed, she was still trying to keep Kinsey back in, whatever decade it was that she was writing her.
Yeah.
So couldn't insert those little fun things we have today to help us get through life, right?
Would have been easier. I thought about that too. I thought, couldn't I just keep her like in the 90s and just, but at the time I was being told, well, it's better. That's not really historical yet. So, just kind of keep pushing her, contemporary is going to be a little bit better. So I went with contemporary, but I definitely would have been nicer to leave her back in the
some major changes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And even now, if there can be a change in 6 months to a year that you're like, oh, this is outdated already.
Yeah. Track my phone, all these things now.
Exactly. All the fun things that you can add into your stories these days. All right. So you created a character, Kelly Pruett. Tell us about her and where she came from within you.
Yeah, so there was a couple of things. When I created her, I was in my mid-30s, and I think she really came into me, felt fully developed. I knew who she was. I knew she had a deaf daughter, and she would be co-parenting with her ex-husband. And I knew her ex-mother-in-law was going to live next door. It's like Kelly just came in and said, hi, I'm your neighbor. Here I am. And this is what my life is all about. But I also think now that I look back from a 20-year perspective, I was going through a lot of the same things Kelly is going through, trying to balance being a mom, I was a newer stepmother, to having a career in my life, like trying to balance, how do you do all of this and still keep a pathway that you want to live, right? So that you're not doing something for everybody else, that you're really following your own journey. And that is really Kelly's arc in this, is she's taken over her dad's agency, and she wants to be the investigator he was, but she's also a mom, and she's also trying to carve her own pathway out as being newly divorced, because she's lived under her husband's, I wouldn't say thumb, but he definitely has strong ideas of what a woman's job is supposed to be. So she's been battling that. And so I think that's kind of where she came from, my wanting to be that in my own life. And and Kelly was kind of going through the same journey. So we kind of went through that together.
But you made her single.
I did.
Why is she single?
I thought it would be a great way for her to, you know, I think when you're married, there's a lot of conformity to that, not in a bad way, but there's a lot of compromise, and it's just, that's the way life is when you're with somebody and that's all good. But I wanted her to have kind of like this place where she was in a lost situation. She'd lost a marriage. She'd lost a friend, because the reason she's divorced is her husband had a one-night stand with her best friend. She's lost her father. So I wanted her in a kind of in a lower position in life where she needed to and would be forced to create her own pathway.
And you had mentioned that she inherits her father's firm.
Yeah.
And so when you just said that, or she's forced to create a new pathway. So this is something, so it's not necessarily her chosen profession.
She was a process server, and her dad kept her fairly insulated because she was a mom, because he was her little girl. He did not let her go out on the dangerous investigation. So she did process serving. She did some stakeouts, and that's what she did. But in Derailed, in the very first book of the series, somebody comes knocking at the door looking for their father, or for her father, and then hires her instead. And so she's immediately on her first case and kind of thrown into the fire, so to speak.
And so when this happens to Kelly, how long had it been since her father had passed away?
Just a year.
Okay.
So, yeah. So she's still grieving.
And was she trying to keep his business going, or was this just an opportunity that presented itself?
Yeah, so she was trying to keep the process serving side going because that's what she had known. And you know, I worked with several PIs. That's a lot of the bread and butter of an agency, right? Is these investigations, these stakeouts, these smaller things keep the lights on. But this presented itself, a major case, you know, somebody who had respected her father. And so she's like, maybe I could be what he was, you know, and if nothing else, my father would want me to do this, to help this person. So she does.
I love the idea of that. And so now my next question is, because this is where I have a stumbling block with it, is how you had mentioned you had worked with some PIs as part of your legal career. So how do you go about, that's not your profession, so how do you go about creating a PI and it being authentic? Like, where do you get your information from?
Well, part of it is, you know, I was a Sue Grafton fan, right? So I've read lots of Sue Grafton. And I think some of it is a little bit from my background, you know, having spent so many years in legal, I tend to I guess I understand a little bit about how procedure might work. And then I really kind of put myself in the role. If I was a PI, what would I be doing right now? If I wanted to do this and I wanted to find out this information, where would I go? And really, it's cause and effect as you go through your novel, right? I mean, if I'm going here and I get this information, I'm going to now go over here and get this information. And if I've got that investigative mindset as I'm going through it, I'm just kind of stepping into the role. And I do fact check if I can. You know, I have a police officer that I run a lot of things through. If I need, you know, clarification, does this work? Or if I did this, am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to lose my license? You'll note there's certain things in the book that I make sure that when I do it, I know that Kelly knows that she's crossing a line. And if she is, she's pulling back or she's making a conscious decision, knowing what she's doing. And those are the things, because I think she's human. She's going to decide, but she's going to make an educated decision on what she's doing as she goes through. So I fact check myself a little bit here and there.
So when you started writing Derailed, you said that Kelly just kind of came and introduced herself to you, which I love that. But did you know the whole story? Like, are you it's a plotter or a pantser is what I hear a lot.
I am a pantser. So okay. I did not know the whole story. I knew in Derailed, I knew that this girl had been killed by the MAX train. And because I worked downtown in Portland, I saw, you know, buses and trains running through the city all the time. And I thought, and I actually worked in a high rise, and I looked down and I thought, gosh, what if somebody stepped out in front of that train right now, or or was pushed right in front of it. And that was the impetus of the whole story. Was she pushed or did she fall because she was drunk and after leaving a bar? And that was kind of the thought. And then I just started writing it. And, I'm just a chapter by chapter girl. The next day I think, okay, now what's going to happen? Now what's going to happen? and I actually changed the killer in that one at the end. I thought I knew who it was. And then at the end, it was somebody else. So I like pantsing. And I'm not a heavy plotter, still not a heavy plotter. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. I've heard that sometimes people know the ending, and even though they're not a plotter, like, well, I know where I want to go, and I'm just going to weave my way through the story until I get there. But you didn't know where you were going to go when you.
Not necessarily. No, I knew certain aspects, like I knew the crime. But I just wasn't sure. And I sort of knew why, but the rest of it kind of came as a surprise as I came through. I'm like, oh, can I write that? Okay. Well, yeah, maybe I'll put that in there. If you haven't read Derailed, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a few things that people will be like, you wrote that? Yeah. Yeah.
So you have progressed, and based on the information that I found about your writing, Derailed was published in 2020, and then Denied in 2021, and you have Deceived in 2022.
Just came out on the 10th. Yeah.
Right. So you went from 16 years on a shelf to 4 years of redevelopment and reorganizing to publishing, and now you're knocking them out year after year.
I have another series starting in September. I don't know. I tend to write fairly quickly. So once Derailed went out with my agent, I actually had already written book 2. I had drafted it. I do not like pressure. I am one of those people that I like to write when I feel like I want to write. Luckily, that's every day, but I do it because I love it, not because somebody's telling me I'm under deadline. And so I wanted to have that second book ready to go. And then that would build me in time if I got a publishing deal, which I did. And then it was a 3-book deal. So I had a little time in between. I was like, well, I have my 2 books and the third one's not even due for 2 years. And this other story idea came to me, which was the one that's debuting, or this launch in September, Hidden Pieces, which is my Portland homicide detective turned small town sheriff. And so I penned him in between. And then I went back and I finished the 3rd book. And then I've gone on now to finish the 2nd book in that series. So that is ready to go. And I'll tell you, I have a standalone. My agent is shopping right now too. So, I've been busy.
No kidding.
You have and even running your own, a business full time and having an important role in that business. And so it's very impressive. So one thing I love about your Kelly Pruett series is the correlation in the names, like they're all D something. And so tell us about that. Coincidence, or once you started with Derailed, you were like, oh, we're going to keep this going.
Yeah, so I will tell you that Derailed was not my title. During Pitch War's process, I had a couple of mentors looking at me, and Kelly is who chose me at the end, but there was another duo that was looking at the book. And the very first thing they said, they said, we love the book, but we would suggest changing the title. Title doesn't fit. I had Bamboozled, and I had an idea of bamboozled, beleaguered, bewildered, like this whole, I still have that concept, but I wanted to go with Bamboozled is what I was thinking. They're like, yeah, this isn't a Bamboozled book. And then they're like, how about Derailed? And I said, well, yeah, there is a Max train in it. I mean, it's a little on the nose, but yeah, I can see how I can work that in as a thread throughout. So once Derailed hit, then it was just Denied, Deceived, and and I've even got on my board over here, Damaged and Destroyed. If I ever wanted to come back for 4 and 5, those would be the next 2 titles. So it was just a fluke, but way I went.
So let's go ahead and segue into what's coming up in September. You're starting a new series, and tell us tell us about that. Get us excited about that.
Oh, I'm actually really this is almost a book of my heart in some ways, because it's set down at the Oregon coast, and my dad was a charter fisherman. So I spent from the ages of 2 to 9 down at the Oregon coast, which was just those fun formative years, right? I'm just running around and playing and out in the sun, and the rain and the mist and all the other things, but in the ocean, very cold ocean. But it was just things that you just keep remembering, right? So I wanted to set the book down there. And it was actually inspired by a crime. However, the actual story was inspired by a crime that occurred in my hometown in 1979, where 2 girls were out walking on a country road. And one of them came home and one didn't, because a car stopped and pulled her into the car. So in my story, it's 2 sisters 25 years ago. One is killed and one comes home. And as the story progresses in current time, a 14-year-old girl has gone missing, same age as the 25-year case. And my sheriff will find out that there's a little bit of an intersection coming up. So I don't want to give too much away, because as you kind of move into it, you realize who the second point of view is, and the coincidences and who might be involved. So it's really, but it was inspired by true crime, which is, you know, kind of cool, and set it a place where my heart is at. So yeah, so I'm very excited about it.
And you said that you've already written the second one to that series, and this is the Misty Pines series that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, so it's a little darker, you know, it's a little bit straddles more of a psychological suspense mystery type of genre, but it's not violent. That's one thing that I'm not really into in general. I don't write graphic violence in my books. You can turn on the news if you want to do that, or watch something, on TV if you'd like. But I do, everything's justifiable and nothing's too crazy. But it's definitely the psychological aspects of it, are a little bit on the creepy side of things happening.
And who's your main character in the Misty Pines series?
Jax Turner, Sheriff Jax Turner. Yes. And Abby Kanikoa is his ex-wife, who's an FBI agent.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Kanikoa. So we're kind of throwing in a little Hawaiian in there.
A little Hawaiian in there, yeah. Yeah. Actually, in book 2 of my Kelly Pruett series, Detective Cooney was inspired by my husband's homicide detective uncle. He's retired now, but so kind of a nod to my Uncle Cooney. And when he read the book, I got a note right away that said, "Oh, Mary, thank you. I saw myself in your book." And I'm like, "Of course." And he's like 85 now, but yeah, he's fun. He loves to talk story about his days. So
I've been dominating the conversation. Does anybody have any questions for Mary? All right, I want to keep going then. Oh, wait.
Well, you've talked about Derailed and the story arc for Kelly. Is it still going at the end of book 3?
Into book 3? Well, her arc in her journey is complete in book 3. And I planned it that way, that I thought, by book 3, this is where I want her to be as an investigator, where I want her to be in her life in general. And I do have ideas for book 4 and 5, but the series is going to rest for now as I go on to launch the new series. But I love Kelly Pruett. I mean, she's such a fun character to write. She's like an old friend at this point. So I'd love to come back to her. It's not going to be next year though. There won't be a release next year.
Well, I've started it, but as far as I've gotten, really like her as a character, and of course the dog.
Floyd. Everybody has to love Floyd. Yes. Floyd is great.
But your imagery is very compelling, and it's easy to see exactly where they are and what they're doing.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's been one of the fun compliments of people who actually live in Portland. They'll be like, I remember this area and I know exactly where you're talking about. And so that's been a lot of fun. What's even more fun sometimes for me is that sometimes I will drive through an area and get a feel, but not specifics. And then people will be like, "I was right there." And I'll be like, oh, that's great. But I'm thinking in my head, but I kind of pushed a bunch of places together. But I don't do that, until they watch this, and they'll know. There
Well,
really wasn't a place that does not exist.
Yeah, right.
and so let's Lance, great segue into my next question, because you do use in the Kelly Pruett, use Portland as your setting, and so, and that makes sense because that's where you are. So and then for the Jax Turner, you mentioned Oregon, which is a place that you have some familiarity with growing up, but you also have Jax coming from Portland, so Portland is big in your stories. Why is that, other than the obvious that's where you're from?
Other than the born and raised?
Yeah.
Really, that's probably the main thing, that I was born and raised, and I know the culture and I know the feel. And I also like being able to drive to some place and get the feel for it personally. Like in the second book, it was set at the Portland Meadows racetrack, which has now been torn down. But I was lucky enough to get in there and be able to, walk around and look at the different people that were, either gambling or at the slot machines or looking at the TVs and following races. And, I like being able to drive someplace and to really get a feel of a location. Although Google Maps is phenomenal, and I've been known to pull those up and look at images and look at street names around things. And that works really well too. But yeah, I just like Portland's one of those places that really, as a crime writer, it's great because it's so beautiful. I mean, we have a beautiful river running through our city. We have Japanese rose gardens. We have Council Crest, beautiful views. But there's a gritty side to our city. We have a homeless problem, issue going on, and we have a lot of crime, a lot of murders right now. I mean, it's just been, but even in general, we're a big city, right? So we're always going to have those things. So it's two sides of the same coin, right? Gorgeous and gritty. And as that's what you want as a crime writer, right? You want that diversity and that contrast. So I like it.
So you also have, you said you live part-time in Hawaii?
Yeah.
So any thoughts on bringing Hawaiian setting into something at some point?
It's funny, I get asked that a lot. Hawaii is my vacation location. So I don't know if I want to bring murder into the one place that I go relax. Although, I know it would work. And I might send one of my characters there to follow a suspect or, but I haven't felt this desire to do that yet. And so I can't say never, because I might go there in February and have something might spark and I'll be like, oh, but at this point, Portland is kind of my thing. I like the Pacific Northwest. I like its diversity, and I also don't want to step on any toes culturally over there. I have been married to a Hawaiian, a 50% plus Hawaiian gentleman for 33 years. And I have, a great asset in that. But, I think you can take advantage and not get it right. And I don't want to get it wrong, over there. So I just kind of stay away from it a little bit and just enjoy. And, my husband's the oldest of 10. So we go there for family and, just to have a good time. So I keep it there.
I understand that.
Yeah.
What sort of rivalry exists between Portland and Seattle?
Well, we have the better coffee. I don't know if there's a rivalry to that. There's no contest. No.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't think we think about it necessarily.
Okay.
I certainly don't. And, to be honest, I live in Vancouver, Washington. So I live right across the border.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lived in Portland forever, but when my husband and his daughters lived here. So when we got married, I came here. This is where I've been for 30 plus years. So
how much orientation, how much does Alaska figure into that at all, if at all?
Yeah, well, it's part of it. I guess it's all considered part of our Pacific Northwest, but it's, not too much that I've seen. Yeah. I've been to Alaska once. It's beautiful, but did a cruise up there. I highly recommend if anyone gets a chance, it's worth the time. It's gorgeous.
That was what our honeymoon was supposed to be, was an Alaskan cruise. And then the practical side of us was like, oh, we just bought a house. We should probably not spend that kind of money. We'll do that later. And we're going to be 25 years in
congrats.
this year. And we have yet to go on an Alaskan cruise.
Oh, you need to go.
Yeah, I'm writing that down right now.
we actually started, we didn't travel for years. We were too busy raising kids and, businesses, but we actually started traveling 7 years ago. 2016 actually is when we did the first Alaska cruise. And now we have the traveling bug. So now we've been traveling. We actually leave for Paris on Sunday. So
wow, we just caught you then.
Yes. So that was a 2020 holdover because, yeah. So we're excited to get back.
Well, speaking, just from 2020, just bringing that up, did that have anything to do with you being able to knock out 3 books in 3 years? Like, did you have extra time maybe during the pandemic?
Actually, no, I had probably less time because we were an essential business because we do pet food distribution. Which is essential, obviously, to feed our animals. And so no, but we did undertake a little bit of a staff cut because stores were not allowed to be open. So we had to reduce the size of our staff by a small portion for a small time. But that just meant that Rob and I were in the company a little bit more to assist. We're very hands-on when we needed to be. If somebody called us tomorrow, we'd be down there pulling orders if we had to. I mean, that's how we started our company, was being part of the team. So, we're always there. And that was kind of the case over 2020 a little bit. We got called in a little bit more and helped where we could. And but I'm a kind of a driven person. And I'm very structured. I mean, I put in 2 to 3 hours a day, every day. And when I have a good idea of where I'm sort of going and the story's flowing, I can produce 3,000 to 5,000 words in a day. And I have that luxury, right? Because I don't have children at home. So if I decide at 3 o'clock, I really want to pound out a chapter, I can do that too, so, and I will. So I stay kind of focused on really getting it onto the page. And so that's how come I'm able to produce. I think I'm just kind of relentless till I get it done.
So speaking about your writing process, do you have any kind of organization or structure to writing every day, like a certain time? Like, what do you do when you first get up in the morning?
Yeah. So, I'm a morning person. That's why this didn't faze me a whole lot. I have a golden retriever and a 13-year-old cat who makes sure that we are up by 5:30, even if we'd like to sleep in. So we're always up anyway. So it's usually my husband and, time. We take the dog for a walk. We, have our breakfast, and I usually hit my office at about 7 o'clock. And now I get rid of these fun games like Wordle and Quordle off the plate, and interact with my sister who lives about 25 miles away, and compare our wins. And then about 7:30, I really start, getting into my writing. And then I write until about 10:30. Then my husband comes home from working out, visit a little bit with him, figure out what our day is. And then I'll come back about 2 or 3 o'clock and, play around a little bit more. Usually reading what I wrote in the morning is what I like to do. So, but it's almost every day. Usually I try to take Sundays off, but if I'm really on a roll, even Sunday gets taken up. So it just depends. But I don't like to be away from my writing for very long. If I'm on a story, I like to stay immersed in it. It helps me keep it moving. So, yeah.
It sounds like a really good schedule, and it works well for you. I just had a thought and I lost it. I hate it when I do that. Okay. Well, let's just keep talking. Like, somebody ask a question so I can reference my notes.
Would it be intruding too much if I ask if you used critique partners or beta readers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, not at all. Finding your community is like, essential in all of this. So absolutely, I have several. I have different types of critique partners. I have a couple of people who I can send pages off to, hey, will you read this first chapter? Are you at all intrigued? Does this work for you at all? So I get some early critiques right away. And then I also have those critique partners that read it at the very end, and then they see the entire product after I've gone through it several times. And I will also say I work with a book coach as well on a fairly regular basis. And I really like the feedback of being able to send, 40 pages or 50 pages to see if the act works or doesn't work. So I do that as well. So but I like all of it. I mean, I definitely have. And then at the end, beta readers. Oh, absolutely. I have a few friends who just read it after I think it's as good as it's going to be.
Right.
and then I find out I missed something and I have to go back and fix it. But I really like that end type reader to read it a few, through 3 or 4 of my friends do that for me as well. So yeah, no, I think feedback is great as long as you're, as long as and trust who you're having it look at it.
I have a question about a book coach. I'm familiar with editors and people like that. How's that different?
An editor probably does a little bit more in depth. My book coach is actually somebody I can brainstorm with. So I do more brainstorming. I'll send like 3 or 4 chapters and she'll take a look at it. Just kind of keeps me on task. I like having deadline in that sense because I know that I've got to produce something by Friday morning because we're going to chat on Monday about the story. And I only started doing that in the last year and a half, the book coaching, but I've really enjoyed it. It kind of keeps me on task and helps me with brainstorming at this point. Yeah.
So Lance's question was where I meant to go. So thank you, Lance. I did want to ask about the community and how you more about, like, are you part of any organizations like Sisters in Crime or any local writing groups or something that help you stay in touch?
Yeah, well, I'm actually the vice president of our Columbia River chapter of Sisters in Crime. So I love Sisters in Crime, and I'm a member of that. Yes, and then I'm Willamette Writers, which is our local writers group, and then I'm in Private Writers of America, and I'm also Mystery Writers of America. So, I'm not I'm active, but I'm not in any type of role with them, but I'm just part of them. So I do actually do a lot of judging for the Shamus Award. In fact, I'm reading this year. So I do participate and volunteer where I can, but yeah, no, I think being part of those groups is great, especially if you're a writer. But even if you're a reader, it's just a great way of being able to get in and see what's happening a little bit. How the sausage is made a little bit is how I always say it, like behind the scenes, it's happening with writers and how it all works. So.
Well, and that's how I got involved in Sisters in Crime. I am a reader, not a writer, although my friends are encouraging me to try writing, but not there yet. And but that's how I got involved. That's why I got involved. I was looking for new readers to read, and then that was kind of the jumping off point for Off the Shelf, was how can we get more readers involved in our organization? So I love hearing you are very involved in the writing community. So the more we learn about you, the more amazed I am. So you have this full-time job, you are a business owner, you write a lot, you give yourself a lot of time to write. And you also are very involved in the writing community. So I'm very impressed with how you manage it all.
Thank you. Well, some days it feels like a lot, but other days it feels like, I'm enjoying it, right? I think there's something to be said about, really liking what you do. And that is actually one of those litmus tests that I always put to most things in my life these days. Do I want to do it? Does it seem like it's going to be fun to do it? And if it's not, then don't do it. Life's too short. I lost a brother when he was 30. I think that I learned some lessons about life is short. Don't do things you don't want to be doing, keep it focused. So yeah. And so none of it feels like it's hard work. I go to work to see my employees. I actually am friends with so many of them. It's more like I go and talk story. Hey, what are you working on? Well, I've got this one story idea. What do you think of this? My husband says, would you just leave them alone so they can work? And I'm like, what? I'm just telling them what's happening. And then of course I love to write, and I love being part of Sisters in Crime. I look forward to the board meetings. I mean, it's just, I'm having a good time. Right. So I think that's the important thing.
Very encouraging.
Oh.
So you had mentioned that you have a standalone that you're shopping right now. Tell us about that.
That's a little bit of a different movement towards domestic suspense or psychological suspense, I guess is what they're doing. But the character is a paralegal, which was, and her sister is seen at a crime and then disappears. She leaves a little note to her sister, says, don't ask, don't follow, which is something that she did as a kid, would tell her little sister to not follow her. And of course, she's going to have to go find her sister. So yeah, that's that particular book, but we're shopping. We'll see, fingers crossed.
And it's pretty much ready to go. Like, can you tell us the title so we can keep an eye out for it?
It's called The Hidden Sister right now, but titles can change.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's only on the agent level, right? So if the publisher offers, then we'll see what happens to it. So, and it's definitely about sisters.
And as you found out when you were doing the pitch wars with Derailed, like you said, it could totally somebody say, oh no, this is what we're going with. So
and you can't be too tied to things, right? Because things do change. That's the one thing that I always tell when people ask about publishing, and I'll be like, the biggest thing is be flexible, because you're going to get asked to change so many things. Don't be so tied to your story that you're not willing to do what it takes to take it to another level, because that's the only way you're gonna, if you want to be traditionally published, that is the way. You have to have flexible and a good sense of humor about these things and just go. So,
have you been with the same agent the whole time?
I haven't. I actually left my agent in 2020. Yeah, at the end of 2020. We didn't quite match, and she's a lovely person. In fact, she's doing some representing on some stuff right now on the Kelly Pruett series, because that's the one she plays. But we just didn't work the same way, and so I wanted a different type of agent, and I signed with a new agent last September, and yeah, so she's the one that has me out with a new. But I did have to write 2 new stories to get that agent. It's not, if people say, oh, did you just go to, it's not as easy as you think. When you leave your agent, it was a little bit of a wake-up call. And I actually wrote a book that she didn't want, and then I wrote a book she did. So that's a shelved book. We'll see if it ever comes off the shelf.
But that's being resilient for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
And did you I love that your advice is to be adaptive. And did you learn that like instinctively as soon as it happened? You're like, okay, I'm going to follow your advice. Or at first, was there some resistance to making any changes? Like, no, this is my story and this is how I wrote it. And
oh yeah, no, I'm human, don't touch my story is the very first thing. I don't say it out loud. But I always give myself a day or two when I get heavy critique or a suggested change, and I have my freak out moment. Like, I don't know a writer who doesn't really. I mean, they're our babies. We've spent hours and years and creating this thing, and you don't like it. What are you saying right now? Well, and like even on the Kelly Pruett, she was a whole lot snarkier when I first started, and that was the very first thing that my editor said is like, oh, I love the setting, I love this, blah, blah, yada yada yada, and but you need to pull her way back or she's not going to be likable. And I'm like, you don't like Kelly? Well, but you bought the series. What are you talking about right now? And that took me a little bit. And then I think I took a day or two, and I came back and I said, okay, I could see where maybe, and that's what I do. And that is probably one of my personality things, is I'm very good at devil's advocate or seeing different sides of things. Given a moment, it takes me a minute, but I'll be like, oh, okay, I could see, if I step into your shoes and I'm looking at it this way, okay, maybe I could see that. So yeah, no, I have a moment in the beginning, and then I then I pull back, and then I try to find the truth in it, because a lot of times it's sitting in the middle, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, here's your thing, here's my thing. What if I do this and compromise? So
Mhm. Well, it seems to have worked well for you.
yeah.
So, we're getting close to our time, so we'll before we wrap up, I am very curious, like, who your favorite authors are and what you're reading now.
What I'm reading now. Let me see. Since I'm doing judging stuff, I can't talk about what I'm
Oh, yeah.
really reading now, but Make Me Disappear by Jessica Payne. She's actually one of my critique partners, but that book just came out last Tuesday, and it is really good. If you like domestic, or this is more psychological suspense, very good. And I love Heather Chavez. She's a newer author. Of course, Kelly Garrett, Like a Sister. But Sue Grafton, you know, you can't go wrong with J.A. Chance and Ivanovich and all those. Those are all people that are all in my bookshelves, and I read every time they have a new book come out. And Bathhouse is actually really good by J.P. Vernon or P.J. Vernon. That was good. So, and then, Diane Freeman. If you love historical cozies, 1899 is what she sits it at. American Heiress, in London. Fabulous series, Ladies Guide to Etiquette and Murder. And she has a new one coming out at the end of next month, book 6, book 5, something like that. So really good for historical. Yeah, so I read all over the board. You know, But
do you pretty much stick with like the mysteries for the most part? That's your preference?
it is. I've just, since I read a Mary Higgins Clark novel in my 20s, I've just been hooked to mystery and suspense. I've definitely read a few, other types of books, of course. And actually, when I was in high school, I loved fantasy. I read the Tolkien series, the Clan of the Cave Bear series. I mean, I loved all those types of books. I didn't hit mystery until I was in my 20s, but once I got there, I really haven't gone back to anything else. So
it's definitely my preference as well.
yeah.
So, well, we thank you very much for your time. I feel better knowing that you wake up early anyway.
Yes, I did have to, put on a little mascara, but that's okay.
Well, you look great. So, and thank you so much. You are fascinating, and I'm so excited to have met you, and looking forward to reading Jax Turner when he comes out, and then the standalone. I keep up with you on social media now, so I'll be looped in when all of that happens.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very, like I said, Hidden Pieces in September. Matt Coyle just sent me a blurb. He said, moody, evocative, yet propulsive. And it's going to be on the cover. So I was like, oh my goodness, that's high praise from Matt Coyle. So we're excited. So.
All right. So
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes,
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. So,
Hold on, I'm gonna turn off the recording.
can we edit? Mm-hmm.